welcome to 2022. But before we move on, I need to tell you what my top 10 books were for 2021. So I have tried to rank them before and just my brain has exploded and I'm like, I can't do that. Please. So I made the Sophie's choice to do it this year, last year, and I'm just going to tell you what they are. And I kind of had this like rough list, but I only just kind of like ordered them in like a minute. And I went with my gut, and that's what it's going to be. Number 10 on this list is The Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. And so this is a historical fiction, but it's also very literary and beautiful, and there's also like a mystery aspect to it, but I wouldn't say it's like a thriller. Anywho, this is one of those books that I had kind of like heard of, but I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna like it. Like, the cover's really sepia. Then I started annotating it because I had no choice, because it was already so beautiful from like the beginning. Let me read you a quote, ladies and gentlemen. Every book, every volume you see here has a soul. The soul of the person who wrote it, and of those who read it and lived and dreamed with it. Every time a book changes hands, every time someone runs his eyes down its pages, its spirit grows and strengthens. Beautiful. So this is like a book about loving book. There is love, there is mystery, there is tragedy, and there is beauty, and the ending is just very heartwarming. And there's some really moments of like cute. Book number 9 is Misery by Stephen King. This was a surprise for me. Like, I was hoping I was going to like it because like the whole premise interested me. So the premise for this one, if you don't know, it's a pretty well-known book, is that this famous author who's written this whole series, he gets in a car accident. And he is rescued by like his biggest fan of all time. And so she is actually a nurse, and she's like, come to my house, I'll look after you. Because she's his biggest fan, she gets to read his manuscript that he happened to have with him for the next book. And he actually hates this series that he's written because it's kind of like a trashy romance kind of vibe. And so she is not happy with how he wrapped up the series. And she keeps him there until he can write satisfying conclusion, and things get very disturbing and very creepy very quickly, but it was very fun to read. This is my favorite Stephen King so far, which isn't saying much because I have not really liked any of the other ones I've read from him even. So this was really good because it had me on the edge of my seat. It's not too long and it has a satisfying end. A lot of Stephen King's books are just kind of like, just cause, man. Just cause, like, it's weird. Go with it. It's interesting to read from his perspective because he is a writer and kind of the internal insanity happening. I'm kind of new to the horror genre, but this book made me realize maybe I can read more of these and enjoy them. Because it's that kind of balance of like, oh, I don't like it, but oh, I like it because it's so grim and I need to know more. Thanks, Stephen. Number 8, hopefully I don't lose the ability to count through this video, is Ariadne by Jennifer Saint. So I read this with a bunch of friends for the Swell Book Club, and interestingly enough, like half the people hated this book, but I loved it. So this is like a Greek mythology retelling, but some people are like it's a retelling because it doesn't twist the story enough. But for me, I didn't need to twist the story. I liked that it focused on these smaller characters and their humanity and their struggles. And at its core, it is about like two sisters and their conflict with their naivete and the roles that are forced upon them, and motherhood and love and tragedy, and how men are not held accountable for their actions, and especially like in Greek tragedy, but also present day, that women are held responsible for men's mistakes. They never have to take responsibility. And the way that this all wrapped up, I just found really tragic and heartbreaking and reinstilled that message. And I was really sad. But this was really easy to read. It is slow, but I found it really easy to read and really interesting. And I loved it. And I'm going to have to reread it at some point. Book number 7 is Ugly Love by Colleen Hoover. I love Colleen Hoover. All her books are like problematic, trademark, but it's just like a good trashy drama time. There's a love story, obviously, and we have 2 different timelines. One with, what's the guy's name? With Miles currently trying to date this girl but being very hesitant because he's like, I have problems. No, I'm not good for you. I'm a bad guy, but I'm going to give you mixed messages. And then also him when he was a teenager with his first love. And the way these intertwine is heartbreaking, and the writing style changes in between the timelines. So when it's younger Miles, it's written kind of in verse and like poetry and a bit creative, and I really like that just shows his attitude change and like that he is just like this little puppy dog that was like, but I love her. Literally, I think he's like, I saw her and he's like, that's gonna be my wife. And I'm like, bro. Obviously, like, look up trigger warnings for this. I don't want to spoil it, but it's traumatic, but ultimately very heartwarming and beautiful. Book 6 is Beach Read by Emily Henry. So I'd heard a lot about this book. I read this back in January, so it's been a while, but it's still made it onto the list. And I tabbed this one a lot. I actually read this at the beach and it kind of got like a bit sandy and like in the elements, which usually I'd be like, no, but I was like, not even mad. So I just found this was like the perfect book for like funniness, for cuteness, for feels, for heart. Like there's some tragedy in this book and there's some beauty in this book. And it's about writers again. I like reading about writers or people that like books because I'm like, same girlfriend, same. These 2 writers are on holiday. They happen to be neighbours and they're like old school nemesis from college. And they write different genres. She writes romance and he writes kind of literary, like speculative, dark shit. And so they're both in a bit of a writing slump and they're like, you know what? I bet you I could write a better romance book than you. And she's like, yeah, I bet you I could write a better spec fic than you. Huh. And so it makes them both step out of their comfort zones and they like are taking each other on little excursions to like teach each other more about the genre. And it's beautiful, and the way it wraps up got me in the feels because it is not just happily ever after. It's like you have to work for your happily ever after. And I'm like, preach. Book number 5 is The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. This book was good, but also made me cry a lot. I read a lot of sad books this year, but this is probably one of the sadder ones, or just this series in general. I think I cried the hardest at the end of the last book. But this book is so good, but so harrowing. It is about our main character, Rin. It's based on real historical events, which just give it extra. And even though this is fantasy, I'd say it's almost like, it's soft on the fantasy. It's not, it's there, but the war side of things is more what we're focusing on. And we just happen to have these people that can call down gods and they're shamans, and we really get into that. I like how early it was signposted that this bitch, Rin, she is willing to do what it takes to win. And she doesn't care if that means hurting herself or other people or people she loves. So it's a hard read, but it's really good. So we follow her kind of studying to get into this academy and like trying to beat out the boys and like learning her magic and then going to war. And there's a lot going on. There's one chapter in here in particular that is very, very difficult to read. So please be warned. Please look up trigger warnings if you need to, but there is very graphic, barbaric depictions of mutilations of people. Please be in a good headspace if you read this, or just have like a lighthearted book on hand, or a puppy to cuddle, or a friend to call, because you're gonna need it. But read it though. Book number 4 is Finlay, Donovan is Killing It by Elle Cosimano. This was just so fun, you guys. I was like laughing and going, oh, very early within this book. So I don't want to give too much away, but it is like kind of like a mystery comedy romance. Light on the romance, but like comedy mystery is the main thing. We follow this girl, she's a writer. Wow, it's like I have like a type. And she writes crime books and she's chatting with her agent and they're discussing like plot details. And someone overhears this and she's like, oh my God, she's an assassin. I'm going to get her to kill my husband. And things just kick off from there. And it's not like, it sounds like it could turn dark, but not really. It's really funny and made even more so by the fact that she has like all these small children she has to juggle with her writing, with all this like people trying to think she's a hitman. And it was just really fun and fast to read, as well as like some of the plot twist at the very end made me go, oh my God. So I'm really excited to read the sequel when that comes out like in a few months. So if you need something fun, just read it. Book 3 on my list is The 5th Season by N.K. Jemisin. This book is fantastic. Oh my God. So, I'm not gonna lie, you're gonna be a bit confused with all the world building that's thrown at you. But the character development, the tragedy of the first page, the way it all wraps together. This is just like a complete masterpiece on its own. And you need to read it. I will admit, I did just finish the sequel. I didn't like it as much, but I think it was more set up for whatever the conclusion is going to be. So it was still good, but it didn't wrap up as masterfully as this one did. But this book is so good. I should tell you what it's about. The 5th season, it's like a dystopian sci-fi fantasy, I want to say, where we have people who can control like tectonic plates and like earthquakes and tsunamis, and they can like either stop them or cause them, but they get their powers very young, and if they're not taught how to control them, they can very easily just wipe out a whole city. So they're kind of treated as pariahs, but also they're saviors sometimes, but people still hate them. And so like we're following like some of these magical people and they're training. There's like academy at the Fulcrum, but then also at the same time, every now and then they have a 5th season, which is just like a real long winter. Winter is coming. Basically, they have like an apocalypse every like couple generations, and they never know how long it's going to last for. But this time they're like, oh, it's going to last for like centuries, because how magic people can like tell. And so animals start behaving differently. They start attacking. They become vicious and poisonous. There's ash falling from the sky. People have to resort to all kinds of crazy stuff, and they like have food stores, and they have like seasonal law, which is like martial law when a season kicks in. And it's very much like a survival of the fittest and like breeding for strengths. There's a lot going on, but it's really good, and I implore you to read it, but also know that you're probably going to cry, because I did. Alright, we're nearly at the end of this list. So, number 2 is none other than Vicious by V.E. Schwab. I can't believe I waited this long to read this. Masterful. Masterful. Action. Heartbreak. I read this in a day. And the way it ends is perfect. It's perfect. I agree with a lot of people out there that this is a standalone. Vengeful exists, but we don't talk about it because it just messes things up. In this book, we follow Victor and Eli, who are these snobby uni students, and they're like, you know what? I reckon if we like die and we're resuscitated, we can become EOs, which are extraordinaries. And so they're like real life superheroes. And they are things that are known to exist already. But they're like, we figured it out. Let's become superheroes. They're both playing their own deaths and resuscitations and come back with powers. And the politics of this, the ethics of this, the way religion comes into play, the way other people view them, their internal mental struggles, the rhyme and reason of how they get their powers is so good. This isn't just like oh, it's kids with powers. This is like nitty gritty, dark, fascinating. And drum roll please. Book number 1 is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. Does she have the top 2 books on this list? Yes. Do I care? No, because she deserves it. This book is probably one of the most beautiful books I've ever read in my life. In this book, we follow Addie LaRue, and she, when we first meet her, she watched 1714. She's living in France, it's 1714, she has to get married, she doesn't want to. Turns out you can make a deal with the devil. So she does, like live forever, so that she can see the world and do all the things and escape this marriage. But the catch is, she lives forever, but no one can remember who she is. She can make no impact on the world. She can have no legacy at all. To the point where if she walks into the room and she's like, "Hi, I'm Addie," they'll be like, "Hi." She leaves and come back, they're like, "Who are you? Get out of my house." She cannot write her name down. She cannot draw a picture. She cannot have possessions for long. It's a pretty miserable existence, but we follow her through the years until she finally meets someone that can remember her. And there is a lot of heartbreak in here, but the character development and the feels and the beautiful, beautiful writing in this book are everything. Small places make for small lives, and some people are fine with that. They like knowing where to put their feet. But if you only walk in other people's steps, you cannot make your own way. You cannot leave a mark. Why would anyone trade a lifetime of talent for a few years of glory? Because time is cruel to all, and crueler still to artists. Because vision weakens, and voices wither, and talent fades. Because happiness is brief, and history is lasting, and in the end, everyone wants to be remembered. So there you have it, folks. Those are my top 10 books of 2021. I realize most of these are popular books a lot of people have already read, but I don't give a damn. These are popular for a reason. And I'm here to remind you that they're popular for a reason. So if you're like me, and you're way behind on reading new books, and even some of the old ones, please pick up these. Please. They're so beautiful. I'm so glad I read all of these books. And I can't wait to see what my next top 10 will be for 2022. Please let me know what your favourite books of 2021 were, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.